Wonderful. Welcome everyone to our webinar. It is Top Immigration Resources for ESL Instructors. We can see by the interest how important this is to all of us today as we are moving into difficult times. And yes, I'm Sherry McKay. I'm the co-coordinator of the Refugee Concerns Interest Group along with TALLEY CARUSO, and we are here RCIG, which is one of the interest groups of CATESL. And we are so fortunate and so honored to have two amazing presenters today. Not only are they in our field, but they are within the legal realm as well. And I'm just going to pass it right over to them so they can share everything they're going to share today. We have Mark Santamaria and Stuart SEABORN. Please introduce yourselves, gentlemen.
Thank you so much for having us. And hi, fellow ESL teachers. Such a pleasure and privilege to know you all. And hi from San Francisco. This is where I teach. And Stuart will introduce himself shortly. And this is the topic. So welcome, everyone. This is an overview of what we'll discuss. And please note that we will take a lot of time focusing on resources for you and your students. And what may be different from this kind of presentation and others is we'll suggest some ESL-related activities coming from our backgrounds as ESL teachers in addition to lawyers. And I'm sure we'd love to keep in touch with you as much as you with us. So feel free to take a screenshot of my information here. Stuart's will be next. And just so you know, we'll also put our information later at the end of the presentation. So if you don't get it now, it's okay. And you will also get the presentation later. And this is Stuart's information. And yeah, so about me, I'm an immigration lawyer, and I've been focusing on immigration for more than a decade. And it's been such a privilege helping clients with my private practice, and we've helped hundreds of clients in court with the USCIS, and we've done various kinds of cases. So it's been such a privilege, and these lasting connections are very impactful to me. And so, but in addition to that, I'm also a ESL teacher, level 1, where I feel most comfortable. And I get to practice my Spanish. And so that's me. And I also want to emphasize that I have bosses, my cat, my wife, and so I know my place in this world. If you want to contact me, here's my information, and such a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart SEABORN. I'm a practicing attorney. I've got over 25 years of experience practicing law. Most of the work I do is on behalf of people with disabilities, including groups of people with disabilities, seeking access to public services, public benefits, public architecture. But I did get exposed during the pandemic to representing folks in ICE detention. So these are people with disabilities who were had serious conditions and needed to be out of ICE detention to be served for those conditions. And that's how I became aware of some of these immigration materials. I'm not an immigration specialist, but many of the materials and resources we're going to share today, I use all the time with clients and constituents, and I would highly recommend them. They've been very useful to me. Just a couple words on meeting expectations. We know that there's a ton of information out in the media. A lot of it is overwhelming about what's changed with the new administration. Mark and I are attorneys, we found it very difficult to keep track of it. Sometimes it's a moving target. We're not going to give an overview of everything that's happening in the immigration world with the new administration today. We'll give a couple kind of key news pieces, things particularly that have to do with the executive orders of the Trump administration. But we're not going to try and cover everything. And that's for two reasons. One, it's impossible to do so, given the moving target nature and the fact that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And the second is that's not our goal for today. We're really here to give you commonly used know your rights resources that you can share with your students You can use them in class. As Mark said, we're going to have some ESL activities that involve some of these terms and these Know Your Rights resources. And we're going to do some actual scenarios. We're going to look at actual scenarios possibly facing your students and possibly facing your school. So that's really the goal today. As ESL teachers, you're in a fantastic position to help your students understand these systems, understand these terms, and help prepare them for the unfortunate situations that may lie ahead. Just a few words about meeting etiquette. We have about 50 minutes, that's 50, to present. We've got about 10 minutes for question and answer. And I would just keep that in mind as you're thinking of a question to ask. The other thing is we're going to try and make this fun. We'll have interactive role plays. We're certainly happy to answer questions during and after the presentation, but we cannot give specific legal advice. So I would encourage you not to ask specific questions about specific situations. And we just have to say this as a disclaimer, nothing in this presentation creates an attorney-client relationship. This is really about general information and knowing your rights.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. And so as I mentioned, I'm also an immigration attorney, and this is actually me when I had less white hair in the background, giving a Know Your Rights presentation at a local adult school. And this was in 2019. Think of all the things you've done since then, right? And now there are a few things we want to emphasize. Okay, so we've been through this before. And I think that can be a comforting thing because this knowledge of their usual tactics, we can kind of predict. And because they've done it before. And so once he was elected, my staff and I said, okay, this is the new reality. How are we going to prepare now? And so we did certain things to prepare for that. And we're doing fine as a law firm. What's different? So different administrators, different policies, but it's at the heart the same. And so what usually happens, like last time, is there was an uptick in stress and anxiety, fully understandable, especially with my students. I noticed compared to this year versus when I did similar talks with my students his first term, I could see a heightened level of passion and anxiety. And so what do I do about it as an ESL teacher? So what I do is, okay, first at the beginning of the semester was when I have my new students, we do a semester system at City College where I teach, and San Francisco. And so that was around the time we just met. And so what we did was, okay, just briefly talk about it and sprinkle in some things because we don't want to avoid it, but we also don't want to stress anyone out. But always end with a positive twist. And I'll show you some examples later. And think about using key terms, teaching key terms, especially if you're a level 1 teacher. Just if they know how to say no, think how powerful that word is, right? So think about that and how you can implement that to lessons. And a few thought exercises, because there's a lot going on, but how about let's reflect. So a few things, like I told our law firm staff, just like before, we lost some cases, but we actually won a majority of them. If the clients know what they're supposed to do, and we as lawyers educate them as what they're supposed to do, the law is pretty clear. Who's eligible, who can get relief, obtain visas if they meet these requirements. And fortunately, a majority of our clients did in his first term, and we expect similar things to happen this time. And we here are all on the same team. It's obvious, right? Right. But if you really think about it, when we got the news about our new president, how did we start reacting to each other? When you got the news, and you asked your coordinator for Know Your Rights materials, how respectful were you in asking that from your coordinator? And so it's something to remind ourselves. We're all in the same team. And we also have to take care about of ourselves, right? We spend a lot of time caring about others. That's why I love meeting fellow teachers, because you're also empathetic and caring. But let's take time for ourselves too. This is a stressful time, yes. And so we do need some time to ourselves, and similarly, know when to say no, right? We can't help everyone. And so we have to spread out the help. Okay, Stuart?
Yes, so we're going to share just a few key components of the changes made by the administration, this new administration. If we go to the next slide. So you probably heard this, the new administration has done an attack on birthright citizenship. That's one of the changes. Thankfully, multiple courts have blocked those efforts thus far. They've also formally ended temporary protected status for persons from some countries. That includes Venezuela. They're threatening to end what's called parole status. That's another protected status for persons from several other countries. And what that means, and this is something that can be overwhelming and scary, is that somebody who was here, say, last year up until recently and lawfully present in the US under one of these protected statuses, no change in their behavior, no change in their activities, and all of a sudden they become unlawfully present in the US. So that's something to be aware of. Another change, and this is something that can impact some of your students and other immigrants who are here unlawfully, and that is the expansion of what's called expedited removal. And so in prior years, when somebody was facing deportation, they would have access to a hearing with an administrative law judge where they could present evidence, things about maybe they had an asylum claim, things that were going bad in their country that necessitated them being here. Now there are certain situations, particularly for folks who cannot convince an ICE officer that they've been in the US for more than 2 years, where the officer, the immigration officer or the ICE officer can actually make an on-the-spot decision to deport. So that can be scary, and that's one of the reasons why we're instructing folks, and we're going to have some role plays about how to avoid ICE officers and how to keep them out of your home, how to keep them out of the classroom. The other most kind of striking change, I think, for ESL teachers is the end of the policy of the prior administration on limiting enforcement in places like hospitals, schools, and places of worship. We're not aware at the moment of any raids occurring in schools. We just wanted to be clear about that. But the administration has said it's going to end the policy of placing limits on enforcement in places like hospitals, schools, and places of worship. And the final thing that might be relevant for ESL students, particularly those in refugee programs, is that the administration has indicated it plans to shut down certain components of federally funded refugee resettlement programs in the US. So if you have students who are refugees, they could be facing cuts and limitations on the services they get, particularly if they're federally funded. Just wanted to mention some key resources, and we've tried to keep the resource, the resource list short and focus on what is going to be most helpful for you and your students. These are the resources that are most helpful we found for us and our clients and constituents. The primary resource, and this is one thing, like if you take away one resource from this presentation, it would be the website of the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. I use this all the time when people have questions about immigration, particularly, and changes with the recent administration. If you can see on the top right-hand corner, there's a community resources tab, and hopefully we'll have time to go through some of these community resources, but that's where you're going to find a ton of Know Your Rights information for immigrants. That's, you may have seen the Know Your Rights card circulating, where it's a little card in multiple languages that immigrants can hold in their wallet that discusses their constitutional rights and the fact that they're going to exercise them. They also have information about safety and family preparedness planning so that families can be prepared in the event ICE comes to the workplace or the home. and they have legal services referrals. So they actually have an interactive state-by-state map where you can click on the state and it shows who's providing legal services to immigrants, including legal services in the event of deportation. So that's like a one-stop shop. We would highly recommend you bookmark that site and be ready to share it with your students. On that site and created by ILRC are the Know Your Rights red cards. I'm sure I've seen on the CATESL boards that these have been circulating. We wanted to mention them for two reasons. One is they're in multiple languages and they're a very good tool, and you can use them in your class for educating your students and having them be aware, excuse me, of their constitutional rights. They could, you use translanguaging. They have them in English and in a lot of folks' native language, and that could be a way to practice in terms of people being aware of their rights. The other thing is when students are in the public, they can keep these in their wallet. And even if their English is not very good, even if they are afraid to speak to an officer, and I would be too if an ICE officer approached me, they can hand the card to the officer, and that immediately signals that the person is going to exercise their constitutional rights, including their right to remain silent. So that's something that's very helpful to teach, but it's also very helpful for your students to have so they can hand to an officer. At least the student won't be asked questions to incriminate themselves. They're telling the officer very politely, I'm going to exercise my rights. And including the news I just told you, we just wanted to make sure that it's clear to all of you and your students, none of the new executive orders nor changes in immigration enforcement policy do anything to limit people's constitutional rights. Those rights are still here. The rights of you and your students are still here today. That includes the right to privacy, the Fourth Amendment right against unnecessary search and seizure, as we discussed with the cards, the right to remain silent, and in criminal proceedings, not immigration proceedings, but in criminal proceedings, the right to an attorney. The other thing that we wanted to mention is that an ICE deportation warrant or a deportation order is not the same as a search warrant that allows ICE to enter a home. And this is very important because sometimes ICE will come to the door. We're going to do a little bit of role play on that today. But if there's not a warrant signed by a judge that has the correct name and address of the person being sought, you don't have to open the door. And we'll walk through a role play on this. But it's at this, for folks particularly folks in your classes who have a change in immigration status or they are here without lawful documentation, don't open the door for anybody. If an ICE agent says they have a warrant, have them show it through the window or slide it under the door and to verify it's an actual warrant. And Mark's actually going to show you a copy of a warrant signed by a judge. You could take a look at it.
Okay, so let's take a look here and start with some role plays. But first, let's take a look at this picture. And let's think about this for a second. Will ICE wear clothes like this all the time? What do you think? Think about that. Like, really think about that. Because we want to emphasize that they can be deceptive. It's totally within their privilege to do so. And so we have to explain to our students to be highly vigilant, right? So here's an example. But first, let me ask you all, can you share with me, just shout out, what's your favorite TV brand? Mine is Sony. I don't know about you guys, but what do you like? Sony. What else?
LG.
LG. Okay. All right. Life's good, right? LG. So imagine this scenario where someone comes knocking on your door and it happens to be a representative salesperson from your favorite TV brand, mine being Sony. So sorry, we're picking Sony today. And so what we'll do now is we're going to pretend that I'm the Sony salesperson, okay? And Sherry will be at home, and we're going to play different roles. First being an immigrant who's relatively uninformed and unsure what to do and very permissive, okay? But first think about it. how would you feel? How would you feel if someone comes on your, look at the picture. It's a nice sunny day, handsome guy. And let's say he has a Sony TV thing, brand logo. Happens to be your favorite logo. What is your initial feeling? You can tell us, both shout out something and also just type on the meeting chat. How would you feel?
Comfort, welcoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And exactly.
Maybe like
I
he's
would
trying to
welcome him.
sell something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys are smart. There's something going on there, right? I see friendly and suspicious. Okay. I trust Ingrid. I see you. I trust them too. First thing I see when it's Sony, I trust you. Right? So think about that. And why? Why do you think they chose to do this? Because this is based on a real example. Why? So that's often one of my favorite words that I tell our law firm staff. Out of the 5 W's and H, what is the most important word for our clients? Why? And similarly, why are they doing this? They meaning ICE, because they know they're playing with your emotions, right? So they do this tactfully. And so, but we have to be smarter. Our students have to be smarter. Okay, so let's do this. All right. All right. So, Sherry, let's begin. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Knock, knock, knock. Hi, I'm from
Hi.
Sony. Hi.
Sony?
Yeah,
Sony,
Sony.
like Sony TV?
Oh,
Sony
Sony
Music?
TV. None
Oh.
other than Sony TV. Guess what? You,
What?
being in this community, are eligible for a free Sony TV. And
Free?
yeah,
Free?
free. And you can, all you have to do is sign up with your information here, and we can enter you in the sweepstakes for a free Sony flat screen Bravia TV. Here you go. What do you think?
Free for sure?
Free,
Ah,
100% sure.
Yes, let me sign.
Okay, there you go. All right, okay. Cut. Okay, nice. Thanks, Sherry. Why was that a bad example of what someone should or not have done? Okay, and feel free. You can text your answers, and also someone feel free, first person to say something. Go for it.
Did you read what you signed?
She didn't in this example intentionally to show that she should have, right? Okay. Kelly said there's no such thing as a free lunch. Yep. Okay.
Can I just add also, like
Yeah.
for many of our new families, there are a lot of things donated to them. And actually they sometimes do receive things from the community. So often different people, I'm thinking here locally, different people show up at the door.
That is a good point. Thanks, Sherry, because for our community too, we have food banks free, right? So why is this so different? They might be thinking, like, I'm in an awesome community, So we have to really, okay, we know, but we have to think about where do our students come from? And how well educated are they in this? Okay. All right. So that's first. I see Jessica Meyer saying, I'm so surprised. Does this happen? This is exactly for you, Jessica. For teachers like you, yes. It's unfortunate, it's crazy, it's unbelievable. But yes, these things happen. And this example was based on a California example in SoCal. So, okay, so that was the first uninformed immigrant. And so let's do this for someone who's more informed. Okay, we're not aiming for perfection. We're just going to try our best. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, 3, 2, 1, action. Okay, so knock, knock, knock. Sony, I have a free TV for you.
Sorry, I don't need TV. Thank you. Goodbye.
But all you have to do is just give us your information. You'll get a free TV.
No, I'm fine. Thank you. Goodbye.
Just one last time. Just how about your name?
No, you need nothing from me. Goodbye.
Okay. Okay, cut. So why is that better than the first one? Okay, what did Sherry do better than last time?
Use your magic
Didn't
word
give
no.
out personal information.
Yeah, two things. I heard Christina and Barbara. Christina said the word no,
Yeah.
right? So yes, no, right? So that word is so powerful, right? And so think about it from the ESL teacher's perspective. How can you help your students learn how to use it? Okay, because think of how powerful that example was, and we can help our students with that, right? And then I think it was Barbara said something else. Can you remind me what you said?
Yeah, I just said she didn't share personal information. She didn't, when he asked, what's your name? She refused.
Yeah, right. So right, exactly. So she refused. Yes.
Just one follow-up clarification I saw in the chat. ICE agents can lie. There's nothing stopping them from doing so. So that's just something to discuss with your students. These kinds of exercises and being prepared to say no are helpful, but there's nothing stopping them from using a ruse or lying.
Yeah. So yes, it's a lot of the kind of question that we see from Jessica, and yes. So this, if think about this, if you didn't know that, how about your students? Okay, so really sit on that for a sec and think about that. That's why we have to be smarter and inform the community. And yeah,
We have two questions from the audience. One of them is regarding if onlookers, like students, would be able to film ICE officers on their phones, as long as they're not interfering with the interaction.
yeah. So sometimes what we tell, and the short answer is yes. And to add to that, yes, but obviously the recorder, whoever's recording it, should be aware of his or her surroundings as well. We don't want to get the recorder in trouble either. But in general, what we usually tell our clients, or when we do these Know Your Rights sessions, okay, let's say this happens. Have a phone ready. Have someone ready to just hit record. And sometimes, if you can, put this on Facebook Live, right? Because they may even try to delete it. Okay. So, but they can't delete whatever's online. So have something ready to go. That's why we have these, we're going to talk about family preparedness plan in a sec. That's this. Okay. Have a strategy, right?
There's
Okay.
also a second question.
Yeah.
So if we as a community are delivering free goods, how can we set that up so the immigrant family is not suspicious?
So there are difficulties inherent with deliveries. One thing we've discussed is having goods dropped off and have people not open the door, and then not open the door until it's clear that the person is gone. It's tough to, I mean, these are well-meaning, often nonprofits who are doing deliveries, but it's also important to keep that in mind. The other thing is, I don't know if it's possible, but to have people get to know who's going to be doing the delivery. It looks like from the question that may not always be possible, but we've encouraged folks to leave goods. If you're ordering food, whatever it is, leave it outside and then wait, because you don't want to be opening the door when anybody else is there, particularly somebody you don't know.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so that's the home. But we here are teachers, or most of us are. So let's change the scenario to schools. And I think that's why majority of us are here today. Because maybe you've heard that before, for decades, the policy has been for Republican, Democratic presidents, there were some protected grounds, such as schools, churches, and some other courts being another one. But unfortunately, this administration has taken that out. Okay, so To Stuart's point earlier, we haven't heard of anything, but let's prepare for it. And that's the whole purpose of this section. Some important points here. And there's a lot of words here. And one thing I want to emphasize that we mentioned earlier is that we're going to give you all some free resources later. And that's all here. For example, this comes from the Attorney General post-election results, okay? And so I'm just summarizing this, what's here, and you'll have access to that later. So for those of us who teach in the public school system from K to 12, there are model policies for responding to immigration enforcement and in the California Assembly Bill. One thing that may help us is FERPA. Because here it says educational records are protected under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So what does it do? Let's talk about that. Federal and California law prohibits schools from collecting or inquiring about students' immigration or citizenship status. Without written consent by the parent, student if over 18, schools cannot share student records or personal data unless there's a judicial order. Judicial order, please remember that key phrase there. The school may release basic information unless the parent opts not to, okay? So let's keep going. Now, let's look at this document here. So pretend an ICE officer shows you a warrant to enter the school. So let's say, worst case scenario, something happens. What do you think? What do you think are some elements to look out for? But first, what's the difference between an element and a factor? So that's a little bit of lawyer talk. This is a similar conversation we have in law school. So let me ask you, fellow ESL teachers, what's the difference between an element and a factor? Tricky one, huh? Element and factor.
I guess we're not sure what an element or a factor is. That's why we're all silent.
Is an
ESL
element
teachers,
a piece of
we
information?
got this. I'm sorry?
A piece of information?
Well,
Type of information?
yeah. So it is definitely information, okay? Okay, we're getting closer. Go ahead, love.
Whether you can make a decision, an element is just a component, but a factor is something that would potentially change your decision, whatever that might be.
Okay, you were getting kind of close, in the vicinity. We'll take that. You guys would pass law school, that's for sure. So for element, what do you think? Do you think all the parts of the law are required? And same question, for factors, are all of the factors required to be enforceable? So what's the difference with element and factor? All right? So I think some of us got it, but basically elements are things that are necessary, are required for something to be valid in effect, etc. So back to the first question. Yeah, exactly, and Tally put it there. So yes, things that are required for something to be valid. So what are the elements of a valid warrant? What do you think? Feel free. For example, the person they're looking for, his or her name, right? Okay, what else?
Judge's signature?
Very good. Anything else?
It has to come from a court.
Mm-hmm. I see dates, Natasha and Kay, thank you.
Official stamp.
Yeah, that's a good one. And Abigail, correct name. That's it. Let's talk about that. Abigail said the correct name. So, and it happens. I want to emphasize that warrants are very important. They have to be accurate. There are many times when I was in court when a fellow immigration attorney or I said, Your Honor, this was an invalid warrant. and we request that this case be taken out of the docket because of that. And many times we would win because of an invalid warrant. So think about the power of that. And think about at this point of the school interaction, what are you looking for? You are looking for this. You can help your students out this way by checking if it's an accurate and valid warrant, okay? So let's take a look here. Yes, let's recap. Many people said yes, issued by a judicial court, signed by a state or federal judge, states that states the specific address of the premises to be searched, and obviously has to match the actual location, right? And must be executed within the time period specified on the warrant. Okay, so let's take a look here, and let's do some role play. Okay, so now Tally, all of us knowing these facts, let's kind of pretend like you were Tally. Okay, so Tally, if you can remind me, which one will you be this first run through?
Today, this morning, or right now, I'm going to be the frazzled, uninformed, hyper compliant teacher.
Okay. Yes, the loving and caring teacher. All right. And look, she's even getting in character, you guys. So there's Tally. Does it remind you of anyone? Okay. Ready?
Hi. How can I help you?
Yes, I'm with ICE. I'm looking for a student by Jose Hernandez.
Oh, Jose, yeah, there's Jose. What do you need?
Yeah, I
Are you
have.
his like family member, or are you? What are you here for?
I'm with ICE. I'd like to speak with him. I have a warrant for his.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course. I will. Whatever you need, let me know.
Okay, cut. Same thing. Thank you, Tally. Nice job. Why was that a bad example? Why?
So we've been given specific instructions at City College. So I don't know if this applies to everyone, but we don't have to let ICE into our classroom or answer any questions. We've been told to refer, like not even interact with ICE except to say, go to the 4th floor and talk to Dean Cahill. And I'm not, and then that's it. Don't engage. Go to the, I don't have the authority to let you in my classroom.
Very good. Yeah, thank you, Barbara, and go City College. Yes, exactly. So think about your role, okay? You don't have to put everything on your shoulders. And that's actually a good segue to the next example. You want to do that, Tally? Yeah, okay. So that's a good segue to the next example that we had planned for you all. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, 3, 2, 1, action. Ding dong or knock knock.
Oh, hi. I don't think I've seen you before. May I see your ID?
Yes, I'm with ICE. I'm looking for a student by the name Michelle Ortega.
Okay, I see your ID seems valid. I'm sorry, but I'm not authorized to accept warrants. So if you could please stand outside my classroom, I'm gonna call our school's office of the president, and just wait just a moment.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay, campus safety on the line. They'll escort you to the office of the president. I'm not able to share any information, but please stand over here and we'll make sure that you are handled with the right level of authority.
Okay, very good. Cut. So nice. Why do we think this is better than the first example?
She didn't confirm that she even knew who that was. You know, wasn't like, oh, Michelle. Oh, yeah. Like she.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And
Because
she
the first
wasn't
one, she was like, oh, he's
nasty.
right there. You want him to say hi? Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Thanks, Christina. And
She
Destiny
also said
she
that
didn't
she's
give up
not
information.
authorized.
Right. And she
Any
said
information
authorized.
outside.
Yes, Ophelia, thank you. Exactly. She said she's not authorized, right? Again, don't put it all on your shoulders. We already have too much. Taking attendance is not easy. And that's just one thing we have to do, right? So think about what you should or shouldn't do yourself, okay? And Tally, was there any other example, like the administrator, what do you think?
No, I think the main thing that I've heard from any of you guys, and then also other leaders, is just be calm and respectful, but firm. So like just find that balance if possible, even if it's a really nerve-wracking experience, because you don't want to escalate the situation into something else because you don't know who you're necessarily dealing with. It's better to just kind of stay calm, don't share any information, and make sure to just get them to the office of the president or some other authority. I think the only thing that we'd probably want to also caution is maybe not everybody has kind of like an established structure. So that could be something that Mark, you or Stuart might be able to provide some detail on.
Yeah, so right, because I see, for example, Sherry's point, not everyone is in a larger institution. And yes, for the larger institutions, there have already been resolutions, things like that passed. And for people like Stuart and I, we're happy to discuss possibilities of options that you can start implementing, realistic options, again, because we don't want to put it all on your shoulders, right? So let's talk. Let's continue this conversation after this.
Yes, feel free to reach out on that. And then we would encourage you, if you say it's a nonprofit or an entity that doesn't have one of these plans, some of these community colleges have excellent plans, to work to help your administration to work on one of these plans to get the policy in place. That's something you could do as kind of a teacher and advocate.
Right. Okay, Stuart.
Just wanted to briefly go over, this is something that you could do as an activity with your class. And this is, again, back to our favorite ILRC website. They have examples with step-by-step guides to doing what's called a family preparedness plan. Sometimes it's called a safety plan. And these are plans that your students can have in place if, say, ICE comes to the workplace and there's a raid, things like having childcare pickup and plans for childcare, having contacts of friends and legal services, what to carry and not carry on your person. Advocates always recommend don't carry anything that indicates that you have residency in another country. But on the flip side, if you have a driver's license from a state or something that indicates you've been in the country for over 2 years, that might actually help prevent an expedited removal. So that kind of thing, in terms of what to carry, what not to carry, certainly carry the Know Your Rights cards. All those steps, have contact for legal services providers, for friends and family, et cetera. You can work on those with your students. It could be like a task-based learning activity where you could, the students can create their own family preparedness plans, and you could work with them using the ILRC materials on the website in class. Something that doesn't have to be overwhelming. As Mark suggested, these are things that don't have to be done in a day. It can be done over the course of the semester, but that's a step you can take with your class, and it'll help educate folks about the steps needed to be prepared, and it will also help prepare them. Just very briefly wanted to touch on discussions with your students about how to choose a lawyer. If there's also one thing you take away about legal services and immigration, say no to notarios. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but in some countries, a notario actually performs legitimate legal function or legal service, not in the US when it comes to immigration. We've seen plenty of situations where notarios have taken money from individuals in immigration proceedings and then done irreparable damage based on their lack of preparedness, lack of experience. So that's a definite no. The other caveat we wanted to give is that in immigration proceedings, unlike criminal proceedings, there's no right to an attorney under the Constitution. There's no Sixth Amendment right to counsel. So there are plenty of nonprofits out there. ILRC has that state-by-state guide to nonprofits that provide legal services for immigrants. There's also the American Immigration Lawyers Association that provides links to looking for private attorneys. All those folks have been practicing immigration law for at least 2 years. And then you could talk to your students about vetting attorneys. Make sure that the attorneys are responsive. They're licensed with at least one state bar. They don't have a disciplinary record. You can look this up online. How do they communicate? Are they clear in addition to being responsive? Are their fees reasonable? And then if your students are having trouble locating funding, there are some nonprofits, and Mark and I have talked about this, that actually do funding campaigns for immigration representation. So, we certainly, we don't want to sugarcoat it. It's not easy, but don't let that be an obstacle. And these are the kind of things you may want to, talk with your students about in advance. so that when the situation happens, folks aren't scrambling at the last minute.
Okay, thank you. So next, let's have some fun with some ESL activities. And maybe you can even make some activities that will encourage them to say more words, increase their vocabulary. So we can actually use this opportunity to help them improve their English. Here's an example, mingles. I love doing mingles. It makes me relax, makes them talk to each other, gives me time to breathe. And here's an example. Let's see here. So this is I teach level 1, so it's, forgive me, I know there's many of you who said no to other languages. I'm sorry. So here, the vocabulary word was actually come, right? Because the topic was come, how to use that in a sentence. And then I added to it, okay, let's practice using the word come and why. So these are 2 important questions. Okay, and remember I mentioned always end in positivity, right? So so this is an actual example that we did in class. And so we practiced in class saying we did it together. Why did you come to the US? And repeat, why did you come to the US? Okay. And then we did a role play. Luis, he said he came here to work. He came here. So we practiced, right? I came here to work. I came here to sleep. He actually said sleep. It's funny when he said that. The class smiled and laughed. And then what really made them laugh is I came here to have kids. So we had fun with it. And this was in relation to talking about what happened recently with immigration use, because this was around the time of the election, and when he was sworn in, and so we had to address it. But then let's remind ourselves, why are we all here? Okay, and let's even practice some English along the way. So, okay, we learned or practicing the word come, how to respond, came, we're mingling with each other. And so, it worked. And so that's one example for a mingle, but there are others like vocabulary presentation, dialogues. You can act out with your students, matching activity. So, and then there's fill in the blanks is another one. So like this one is fill in the blanks, right? So, here are some important words: silent, lawyer, immigrants, questions, rights. Think about how important every single word here is. Okay, and worst case scenario, they only remember 1. But remember, one of the 5 here, that might be what saves them. So if you can just get them to learn 1 word, that might save the day for them, right? So think about that, and then they can, choose among these words and fill in the blanks. And so, and as I mentioned earlier, think about the power of the word no in immigration context, and think of ways we can teach our students to say it respectfully and firmly. Okay, so those are some activities, and it's up to you. You do what you feel most comfortable with. It could be a red card practice, family preparedness plan checklist that you make with your students. You can actually use this opportunity to have some fun with it. So here, family preparedness plan. What can you do with it? What topic can you possibly teach with it? Family vocabulary. Mom, dad, uncle. Okay, so let's make a checklist. Mom, her name is da-da-da. So think about that in relation to what you can complement these immigration contexts and tips with. And Stuart?
So just to sum up on next steps, definitely share the resources we provided with your students. And as Mark has suggested, these are things you can go over with your students You can be a resource in terms of helping your students navigate the websites and find organizations, whether it's nonprofit organizations or private practice. If your districts do not have policies, like some of the good ones we've talked about and folks in the audience have shared today, maybe you can be one of the people that helps the district or the organization, if it's a nonprofit organization, create policies related to things like ICE visits. There's certainly a lot of work to be done on that front, particularly in the nonprofit sector. You can donate to an organization that helps immigrants or volunteer at a local nonprofit. And Mark has graciously offered, if your students contact him within the next 2 weeks, that he can provide a free consultation. For teachers, feel free to email either Mark or I, and we'll try and respond to you as quickly as possible.
We have a bunch of questions here. I don't know if we're open to taking them or if you wanted to go through the review first.
And
the review is very brief. Just as Mark said, think about what's brought us together. We're certainly stronger working together, working as a team, whether it's on our campus sites or in this community. So we just wanted to have folks think about that. In terms of the prior administration, things worked much better when people were working as a team. And then if you could, in the chat, let us know one thing you learned today and what you thought of our session. That's helpful for us as feedback.
We also just launched a poll. We meant to send out a pre-poll, but we have a post-poll for you to help us also understand if this was something that was helpful, kind of more in a 2-question format. But we also welcome your comments, as Stuart and Mark have requested. So I'm going to start from the top here. One of the questions is regarding how and where ICE is able to approach students in public areas on the campus, quad, cafeteria, out and about. What is the scope location wise?
So ICE will wander around your school, and with the new executive order and the policies around where they're going to approach and not approach, you may find ICE folks just wandering around. And that's one of the reasons it's important to have a plan to identify, and school sites are different. So some it might be easier to access for ICE than others, but it's important to have a plan to identify folks walking around the campus, et cetera, so that they can be taken to the administrator or security, whoever is the one that's been tasked with addressing, is it a valid warrant, et cetera. But they may just walk around the campus and show up. And there's nothing, I'm not aware of anything stopping them from asking people like, do you know so-and-so?
Yeah. I've heard house is the safest, car is the next safest, and then everything else is kind of a wild card. Does that seem just about in line with
house as long as you don't open the door is
house
the
as long as
safest.
you don't open the door. Right. And then one other thing, I believe this was also in that same realm. Should our immigrant students who are here legally be worried?
Legally, like, yeah, yes and no. So if they do whatever they're supposed to do, they should be fine. But I always tell my clients, okay, you're a green card holder now, great. Or you're asylee, you were granted asylum, great, congrats. But what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? Because I've had many clients who messed up and they had a DUI, whatever, and they get pulled back into immigration court by their own doing. So they should try their best to become citizens as soon as possible. And there are many of our students who've waited too long to become citizens because of the language barrier. They're afraid of that. First of all, there are some exceptions. You might be able to apply for that exception to take the naturalization exam. Second, I've had level 1 students who passed the test. And so if they could do it, I often tell my students, other students, you can do it.
I want to echo the piece about like a DUI or something that like there are unforeseen circumstances that could happen, and there hasn't been enforcement yet on green card holders, but there could. And that the only way to fully protect yourself under the Constitution is to become a citizen, as Mark said. So just I would echo that as well. In terms of the family preparedness plans, I just saw a question pop up in the chat. If folks have copies of their residency, of their green cards, it does not hurt to carry that on your person. We can't answer, like I saw a question about somebody's asylum claim. I would talk to whoever the attorney is that worked on that asylum claim. Can't answer specific questions like that, but certainly carry copies of something that indicates that you're a legal or lawful permanent resident if you have that.
There was a comment here from someone that works at Santa Monica College regarding having a letter, like the teachers themselves having a letter to hand over to ICE because the verbal confirmation that we don't know if anyone is here, like a student that somebody might be looking for, might pose an issue in terms of us being seen as lying. So is that something that you've heard in terms of like speaking versus handing a paper or anything like that?
I speaking for myself, I like that policy. I think that takes a lot of stress out of the teacher. And at least the teacher will know what to do in terms of just handing that paper over. I like that policy. That's all I can say.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another question here. Any recommendations for teachers told that the institution will comply with ICE?
For teachers that, okay, got it. Stuart, you want?
So, well, I mean, if I'm understanding the question correctly, so that the school is saying that it will open its doors to ICE? Is that,
That was my
I mean,
question. Yes, or some version of that. Yeah.
So we're not encouraging teachers to block the ICE, like to kind of physically block ICE from entering. If the administration has made that decision, it may be out of the teacher's hands. Certainly I mean, I would talk to the administration about where to direct folks either way. So some of the policies that folks have talked about at the community colleges where there is an administrator or a dean or somebody who is tasked with that. It's unfortunate that a school is telling its staff that they will comply in that situation. I mean, there still are privacy protections that Mark has mentioned that apply, including federal privacy protections. I think we have to address the particular school on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and to add to that, Christina, so if something like that happens and you're in that kind of school, maybe you can consider like do your part to help the student out, but you know, you have to walk that fine line because we want you to keep your job. But always note that they will, worst case scenario, they get pulled into court. Okay, then that's where the student's legal team can assist. And it will help if we inquire with the advocate teacher, okay, what happened? Tell us, did they enforce was it a valid warrant? What did you see? What kind of interaction did you have with the ICE officer? What questions did they ask the officer? Did they have an interpreter? And not necessarily that they had one, but maybe the student said something, he thought the answer was this or that, right? So those are the ways you can help in an environment where it's not that helpful for that student. Is there anything else to say? And by the way, I'm okay with staying a few more minutes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question regarding what are reasonable fees? Is there a way to understand, you know, what a reasonable fee would be for immigration lawyers? If I'm understanding you correctly, Margie, feel free to clarify.
Stuart, you want to take that one? Or...
Yeah, I mean, it said, you know, one of your things was reasonable fees, and I'm not sure we're in a position to understand what that really means. Sure. And our students might not be either.
Yeah, the fees are going to vary depending on where you're located as well. So the question really is it something that your students can afford, and if not, should they be looking at other sources of funding? The only thing I would say is that they should your students should ask for a fee schedule, so that they're not going to be overcharged. They're going to be charged what's on the schedule if the attorney has a fee schedule. That's something I would encourage them to ask. But yeah, it's a little vague, reasonable fee. I would make sure it's something that students can afford, and if not, then if they've done due diligence in terms of searching for attorneys in the area, look at other funding sources if they can't find a nonprofit attorney.
Yeah, and to add to that, so like any consumer, it's best to do some shopping and comparing, right? So you can tell your students, don't stop with one. You may like him or her, but maybe you can get a better deal somewhere else. And so at least it gives you a baseline of the kind of rates there. And so yes, fee schedule, totally agree with that. And some attorneys provide down payment options, and then you don't have to pay the whole fee. So things like that. You tell your students to ask those kinds of questions related to their fees. Okay. Yeah.
So question, I'm wondering if we
Yeah.
actually have Jennifer Gagliardi on the line, but like there's a question regarding any links to resources, specifically constitutional rights in simple English or other languages.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot. There's a lot out there. First, you can go to uscis.gov, and there are some free materials there. But if you just Google some, you'll find some. And we'll add that.
Hi, this is Jennifer. Yeah, there are some really great resources. What did they have in mind? I'm just trying to drop something into the chat right now. What is specifically are they looking for?
Christina Kaufman, can you speak up?
Yeah, mute.
I'm sorry. I was typing in the chat and I completely missed the whole thing.
It's okay. Just about the naturalization questions.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is it about naturalization or is it about constitutional rights?
Oh, sorry, constitutional.
Yeah, constitutional rights.
Yeah, I have some really great websites specifically for ESL students on my website. And if you want to email me directly, I'd be happy to help you out about that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can you share your website?
Yeah, 1 second. This is okay. Yeah, it's uscitizenpod.com. And I just put something in. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jostling things here. So this was a PDF that I just wrote up really quickly. You see it's bit.ly/KYR-update, and it has some really good lesson plans there that are appropriate for ESL students and also for family literacy students. But if you want things specifically about constitutional rights, I can talk to you about that a little bit more offline, and I'm putting the rest of my information in the chat.
I'm thinking we might want a part 2. We were originally thinking there would be a part 2 in March. If there is interest, please let us know in the chat by putting like a plus or a thumbs up or something like that. Because I think that there's a lot that we can do moving forward with this. If there's any particular topics, it sounds like we might have kind of a lead into a good topic using additional resources that are leveled for our students. Perhaps that could be the next thing. I don't know if that sounds like a good next step, but I feel like we're kind of heading towards that direction now that we've got a nice foundation.
Yeah, and so for those people who are concerned about sharing information with their students because it can be traumatizing, really maybe sharing some examples of how we can do that and modeling that could be helpful.
Well,
how you did already, Mark.
And the resource that I put out, there's some good graphic literature that talks about traumatic experiences, and also some resources that I shared from an immigration site in New York, from New York City. So so take a look at some of those resources, and it really I'd be happy to help further.
This
Thank
is
you
awesome.
so much, Jennifer.
Yeah. In case anyone's wondering how I was able to just like get her name off the top of my head, Jennifer Gagliardi presented in the CATISO conference back in 2022 in Pasadena. And so just a little plug for our organization. If you are not already part of CATISO, I highly recommend for you to join, because we have so many really talented, really caring educators in our organization, and being able to learn from one another is one of the biggest things that I really think we need during this time. So I sent the link here for anyone that isn't already a member or would like to share it with others, because we host sessions such as this and other sessions, including like materials creation and pronunciation and all sorts of other things. So even if this is not, top of mind, and there's other topics you would like to also get involved in, there's something for everyone. So definitely join CATESL if you are not yet a member, and it's only $30 a year.
Yes, go to CATESL.
I have a quick question for Mark. So
Yeah, sure.
you do recommend that we do talk to our students. I haven't done it for our ESL students about changes and new changes that have gone on, because just like you mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation, when they announced our new president, our ESL students went from really low numbers. So I'm a little bit afraid of talking to my students. I feel like I'm going to be missing more students. You recommend that I do it regardless?
So it depends. So you have to really know your class, as I'm sure you do, Ophelia. And so what I did was with my class, we just got to know each other in the beginning of the spring semester. And, what did that align with? And so I chose to talk about it because I wanted to assure them that we as a school will do what we can to advocate for them. And fortunately, my numbers have stayed relatively the same since the beginning of the semester, because they know that they have someone advocating for them that's willing to do whatever it takes to help them out. But also, yes, you have to mention what's going on if you want, but then how are you going to twist it around to saying like, okay, it's bad news. It is what it is, but how do we learn from it as a community? How do we help each other? Right.
Okay,
So
I think I'll turn it around that way, as is how do we help together as a community instead of just scaring the students away.
Yeah,
What's going on?
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, I have a question.
Yes.
I teach ESL at City College like you, and I have a remind group for my students. And when I noticed a slight drop in attendance, I wondered why. And so I, put out a remind message, and I got some, valid reasons why they weren't coming. And then one student said, "Es por la migra," right? It's because of immigration. And I don't know how to respond to that, because I don't want to put my student at risk and say, "Hey, I'll do everything I can to support you," if he doesn't feel comfortable, leaving his house, or I guess I just really wonder what I should send back. What's the message on remind that I should send back to that student so that he is protected?
That's a tough one. I get it, but I've had this question too before, and what I often do at these Know Your Rights sessions is tell the people there, don't let him win. If you stay locked in your room, you let him win. And you came all this way to be in your room, right? So think about that. And obviously you want to make it nicer and more polite, but think about that and how you want to, because regardless, it's not helpful if they're just stuck in their room doing nothing. So if worst case scenario, something does happen, okay, they know their rights. And sometimes it's a blessing in disguise because they don't know. Sometimes clients have no idea they actually have a good case. So they just stay in the shadows because they think there's just no hope for me. But then sometimes clients would come to us and say, "Oh, yeah, this happened, this happened." I'm like, "You have a case. We can actually help you." And many times we actually won. It's just they have to be aware of their rights and figure it out with their legal team. Yeah, I appreciate that question. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah, my pleasure. Just a few things as we close up. So yes, just a humble request, if you could just write a Google review for SANTAMARIA Law Firm, which is my private practice based in San Francisco. You'll find us there. I'd appreciate that. And I'm creating an AI app for ESL teachers, U-Haul, because there's a song by Michael Jackson that says, "They don't really care about us." This is for you, the teachers. We want to make an app to make lesson creation easier, like mingles, worksheets, using AI. So it's still in development, but we have our website. We're making progress. And if you could just give us your email. We'll be happy to give you updates on the AI tips for your tool and tools for your ESL class. And the link is there. And that's it for me. So thank you. And then here, in the end of the presentation, please note there's some very important steps, important links. Okay, so this, okay, as Stuart said, one takeaway, ILRC. Okay. Okay, but how do you use it? So go here, you can click here, you can find an attorney near you, you can get the preparedness plan here, just click around and you can go over it with your students. Okay, so think about that. And then, as I mentioned, this one is from the Attorney General, and think about how it's very detailed. To their credit, they did provide a lot of really good guidance. For example, here, responding to requests for access to schools for immigration enforcement purposes, right? And so it goes on. And then warrants and subpoenas. So let's take a look here. Some of you asked, what should we look out for? Which kinds of warrants are valid? Which ones aren't? And it thoroughly goes through the differences of warrants that will work, warrants that won't work. Okay, so there's a lot more here. So please click on these links here for more information and resources.
Mark, can you drop the AI website, your AI website for teachers in the chat?
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, just to follow up on that for folks who are having trouble sifting through news about recent changes in immigration enforcement, the American Immigration Council tracks, it doesn't track everything. It's impossible to track everything, but they track the most recent changes that are the most relevant to the most people. We found it to be accurate. So that's if you I'm not encouraging you to go out and just spend your life tracking immigration news, because it would be very difficult and frustrating, but that's a good source. They're accurate and they're fairly up to date. For your students who need information in up to 20 languages about recent changes, but also the immigration system and adjusting to life in the US, we found that USA Hello is helpful. And then for those who are unable to find a nonprofit attorney, the American Immigration Lawyers Association has a Find an Immigration Attorney website. Most of those folks have been practicing immigration law for over 2 years. And so that's just another source of information.
Okay, so Sherry, Tally, thank you guys.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, one, of course, the information has been hugely helpful. And many people from your schools, you're getting information. We're getting information from all these different websites, but it's hearing it from you and hearing it from fellow educators that really, to me, is like so comforting. And that we're all here together. Exactly. I think different people have mentioned that, right? Together we're stronger, and coming together, and we will, I think it really makes sense to have a follow-up. I'm just so grateful to you, Mark and Stuart, for taking your time. It was just, you put a lot of thought and care into the presentation and how you showed up today. And for everyone who showed up and asked questions and contributed, I'm just very grateful. So thank you so much.
All right, we'll be in touch. Keep an
Yes.
eye on catisol.org. We'll also be sending out a follow-up email with the link to the presentation, same one we sent before, but just with a little bit more context. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the four of us. We'll make sure to send our contact information also directly in the email to you. Thank you so much for joining and spending your Friday afternoon with us. We're in this together. So
thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Sherry, do you see the post-meeting results on your screen or no? Interesting. Okay.
Maybe it'll be in the recording. I'm not sure.